This week on Inside Olympia, we begin a month-long look at the state of education in Washington in collaboration with TVW's The Impact. Our focus this week, artificial intelligence. How is it changing education, the computer science field, and life as we know it? And how should schools prepare students for life and work in an AI world? On the program for the full hour, Ed Lazowska, Chair Emeritus of the Paul Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington.
From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
Welcome to Inside Olympia. Artificial intelligence is quickly changing the world as we know it. How much and to what extent it will revolutionize life and work remains to be seen. Some think AI is overhyped. Others say we should prepare for a future where AI eventually reaches the point of general intelligence, similar to that of a human, only smarter. Regardless, this fast-moving technology has implications for school, work, and life in general. So how should schools be incorporating AI into preparing students for the future? What changes will colleges and computer science programs need to make? What jobs should we be preparing our kids for? And which ones will AI render obsolete? On the program for the full hour this week to discuss this and much more is the Chair Emeritus of the Paul Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington, Ed Lazowska. Welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
Congratulations on your recent retirement after nearly 5 decades. I'm very interested in our second half to talk to you about the span and scope of your career, about the importance of the Pacific Northwest in this country's tech evolution, and much more. But we're going to start in this first half talking about the here and the now and how fast technology is changing. So you've just, as I mentioned, retired after a nearly 5-decade career in the field of computer science. How are you processing, and maybe that's the right word to use, this moment we're in where it feels like AI, and I know it's not new, but it's roared onto the scene in a big way in just the last, say, 3 years. Deep breath here. How are you thinking about this? Because I know what I'm thinking.
Well, let's talk about the history of AI. The phrase was coined in the 1950s. Right?
It's been around for a while.
A group of
at least the concept has.
Luminaries proposed a Dartmouth Summer Research Institute in Artificial Intelligence. And their proposal for funding of this workshop it laid out all of the challenges of artificial intelligence. And it said, we think more or less we can knock off a number of these if the right group of people get together for a summer. Okay, that was a bit optimistic. Okay, so we've moved forward over the 7 decades since then, sometimes rapidly, sometimes slowly, but there's been just a burst of progress in the past 10 years. And that burst of progress has gotten us to the point of large language models that are widely used and visibility to the public. Now, I think it's different than the way the internet sort of took people by surprise, took the public by surprise, okay? The internet really dates back to the late 1960s, but with graphical web browsers in 1993, suddenly the web and the internet popped on everybody's radar screen, but we in technology had seen it coming and progressing.
Which is not dissimilar actually to AI.
Well, except that AI caught those of us in the field by surprise.
Oh.
This burst of progress.
Interesting.
I think no one realized that that simply scale, that is very, very large models trained on vast amounts of data, would exhibit these characteristics that we find astonishing. So this took people by surprise. I think no one expected the breakthroughs we've had. So that's what's different about it. I think professionals in the field were taken by surprise.
The other thing that seems different is then the acceleration, the pace at which this is changing. It seems like almost by the month or by the 3 to 6 months, every time a new model or version comes out.
Yeah, I think more generally, the pace of change in the world has been relentlessly increasing again for decades, and this is what causes people to be somewhat fearful. So it's not just AI, but if you scroll back, 100 years ago or so, half of all employed Americans worked on the farm, and now it's 1.5%. but that's a change that took place over generations. And people had the opportunity to reposition themselves and educate the next generation to be prepared for different jobs. Okay, it was sort of slow and steady. This is very rapid change, and that it's unsettling to everybody.
A number of years ago, Thomas Friedman wrote a book and talked about if you want to keep up with changes, because change, I think, really started to accelerate around 2007, I think is the year that he sort of uses as the beginning of kind of modern technology history. And he said, think of yourself as riding a bike, but now I'm thinking maybe we're more like on the electric scooter or the e-bike to try to keep up, and maybe even then we're falling behind. So sticking with this idea of like how do we process this moment we're in, there are those who are saying that we should be fearful of AI, that it's going to solve a bunch of problems, that it is overhyped and some of these big companies are going to have a big bust soon, that it's going to replace workers. No, that it's actually not capable really of doing that. What do you tend to think as you look into your into the future, and what do you think where do you think we're headed with this?
No one has a perfect crystal ball,
Yeah,
and I certainly
that was
don't.
the term I was trying to come up with.
Brad Smith had a book a number of years ago called
The Microsoft president.
Right. It was Tools and Weapons. Okay? And every technology has uses and abuses. And information technology is no different, and AI is no different. So I think the challenge is to maximize the positive uses, the positive effect, and minimize the negative effects, the abuses. And again, the rapid pace of change makes that more challenging, but that's what we need to do. I'm an optimist. I think that we need to look at applications of AI that are human augmentation rather than human replacement. Okay? And
Help
that's
us
important.
do our jobs better,
Help
be
us
better students.
Do our jobs better, be better students, be better lawyers, be better faculty members, be better everything.
Doctors.
Okay, doctors, absolutely right. I think we always, in technology, tend to overestimate what can happen in a short number of years and underestimate what can happen in a longer number of years. I think we have to realize that much of this technology is not now ready for prime time. Okay, the problems of hallucination in these AI systems are real, and there are a set of other issues. You read in the paper about lawyers who are sanctioned for submitting briefs with non-existent citations to non-existent cases, for example.
The crime wasn't using AI. The crime was not checking AI's work and then submitting it to the court.
Right. So, from a computer science point of view, what are the jobs going to be in the future? Debugging becomes more important than it ever was because you're going to have AI generating buggy programs. If we talk about workforce for a minute, we should spend more time on this, but there was a wonderful New York Times article a couple of months ago that said roughly the bottom rungs of the career ladder are breaking. And there was a paper just the other day by Eric Brynjolfsson at Stanford that put some data behind that. In a set of fields where AI has high applicability, the employment of people in the 22 to 25 year age range has decreased. That includes software and other areas. Now, it's not clear that this can be ascribed, how much of this can be ascribed to AI, but
the implication is significant because if you can't get your first perch, your first toehold, then it's very hard to move up the ladder.
That's exactly the point. Yeah,
or even to get onto the ladder if the bottom rungs go away.
Historically, people take a first job doing relatively routine things that get them the skill set to move up the ladder. And those routine things used to have to be done entirely by humans. And now they can perhaps be done more efficiently or entirely by automated means.
Well, that's going to be a nice transition to think about how we should be viewing AI in the context of education. But let me ask you one more question since we're sitting in Olympia in the seat of state government. What are your thoughts on the role of policymakers, especially at the state level, in trying to regulate or place some guardrails around this rapidly evolving technology?
I am not an expert on this, but I fear excessive regulation at a time when the future is uncertain. And I think there is always a trade-off between safety and innovation. Okay? And we need to continue to be an innovative region and an innovative nation. And that, I think, honestly means taking some risks, okay, rather than over-regulating.
Okay, we could debate that for the whole hour, but we're not going to. So let's move into the education sphere and realm, which is obviously what you're intimately familiar with. And we'll kind of work our way backwards. We'll start in the realm of higher education. And a recent quote from the director of the Allen School is quoted by GeekWire saying, "Coding, or the translation of a precise design into software instructions, is dead. AI can do that. We have never graduated coders. We have always graduated software engineers." So if routine boilerplate coding can now be handled by tools like ChatGPT, and if coding is dead, where does that leave a program like the UW's Computer Science and Engineering program that doesn't feel like it's ever just trained people to code, but also has to start thinking about how this technology is going to take up some of the slack, do some of the work, and then you got to start training and educating for this new reality?
So computer science is a field that has for decades changed faster than any other field. And
you've had to be nimble.
And you've had to prepare students for lifelong learning, because the particular tools and techniques they're using today are going to be entirely different in 5 years and 10 years. Okay, so
obsolescence is
it's built into this field.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the curriculum has to constantly change. We have to prepare students not just to use the state-of-the-art approaches and the state-of-the-art tools that they'll meet when they join the workforce, but to evolve over time and move forward. And that, that's the nature of the work. So that's happening. Now, we don't yet have hard and fast policies on the use of AI in our various classes, and the reason is we're conducting many experiments and don't know what the right approach is. And it seems, again, premature to regulate, if you will, to specify how AI will be used, but it will be used, okay? And it's used throughout our curriculum. An important aspect of the curriculum is the ethical aspects of this, right? And I think computer scientists have been a bit late to the party thinking about safety and ethics. I think civil engineers know that if they design a bridge incorrectly, there's going to be lives at stake, okay? I think computer scientists have been a little bit slow to recognize the implications of the technology that we're releasing on the world. But
and that's true of a lot of fields that are new. They start to organize and grow up and mature before the ethics rules are in place.
Yep.
So even though you're not a fan necessarily of policymakers coming in and regulating AI, you do think that in the academic realm that computer scientists and computer science professors need to be thinking about
need
this.
to be completely aware of the implications of the technology we're building and the ways it's being used. Absolutely, yes.
How do you think this will change the kind of educational experience of computer science students coming in the door? What would you tell a prospective student who's saying, okay, AI burst onto the scene 3 years ago. I want to make sure I'm going to go to a program that's reflective of this technological breakthrough. What am I going to get that's different than you would have been teaching me 5 years ago?
Well, what you're going to get is exposure to a set of tools that didn't exist 5 years ago, and exposure to a set of concerns that didn't exist 5 years ago, or at least weren't very visible. And again, this.
So is there an analogy here? And forgive me if this is a terrible analogy, but if we're talking about an evolution in, say, automobiles, you're going to be working on and seeing and being able to pull apart the newest technology and try to figure out how it works?
That's a fine analogy, yes, okay? And, I think, again, we educate engineers at the University of Washington. That's what we produce. It's people who can work in teams to figure out what problem needs to be solved, what approach to use to solve it. And
you're teaching people to think.
Translate that approach into a solution to the problem that meets human needs.
This idea you said of already starting to use AI, how in the School of Computer Science and Engineering are you thinking about AI, as sort of a tool, a helper, Does it do the first kind of the early work, and then you build up? Like, I think I can imagine trying to give students some instructions. Like, I know that you're not saying, here's the specific rules on how to use it, but what's your best advice on how I should be using it?
Well, let me focus on software engineering in general, okay? And it has been evolving and becoming more efficient and more automated, again, continuously over decades, okay? So, I learned to program in assembly language, moving contents from one register to another.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. Then there were high-level languages. These days, C, C#, C++, Java. Okay. Right. Then there were libraries, GitHub, where you could actually download subroutines, essentially. Okay. Now there are AI tools that can sketch out really significant solutions to problems. They may be a little bit buggy, but it's astonishing what an individual can produce even without any particular training, right? And our students are going to be using those tools to begin their solutions to problems.
Where do you think AI is most helpful in the field of computer science and engineering?
It's helpful everywhere, but mostly what we do is build systems, which means designing software, and AI can help with that. It can accelerate the process. Let me give you an example of something that AI can do almost by itself. There's an Amazon blog post last December, I believe, in which they had to update 10,000 software programs from one version of Java to another. Okay? And they turned AI loose on this, and the claim was that it saved thousands of programmer years of time. Okay? Now, one can say, gee, does that create unemployment? In fact, this is the sort of tedious, mundane, grungy work that Amazon's engineers hate doing. Okay?
This is the stuff, it's doing the work that nobody wants to do, so I'm freed up to do something that would be much more intellectually challenging, rigorous, and where the company is going to get more benefit from my time.
And here's the extremely, I admit, optimistic view of this, okay? Software, information technology has always been what's called elastic. That means the less expensive you make it, okay, the more of it people want. So the best example of this is air travel, right? You make air travel less expensive, more people want to fly, and despite the fact that there are fewer pilots in every cockpit than there used to be, we have more pilots than we ever did. Software, much the same. We keep thinking of additional things for it to do. Now, we now have this step function in productivity, and we have to wonder if that step function is finally going to catch up with the elasticity. I think that's an open question, but there is just so much more for information technology, computer systems, electronic systems, software to do to make our lives better.
Let me ask you another question before we move on to the K-12 realm about the future computer scientist or computer or engineer. Are they all going to go work for AI companies, or are they going to take AI as a tool in their toolkit and go work for a software company or a company that needs to use technology to deliver whatever its product?
Well, traditionally, 70% of the people working in software do not work in the software industry. Okay? They work at banks and insurance companies and Boeing and a bunch of places like that, Starbucks, Nordstrom's. Okay? So that's where the workforce, by and large, is. That's not what University of Washington students tend to do because we have such a vibrant software industry here. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay? And here, it's a mixture of companies that are in the business of AI and companies that are in the business of using AI. But I think every technology company is going to be utilizing AI to some extent.
What's your advice to the departments and schools outside of computer science, say at the University of Washington, who are also trying to navigate this?
Sure.
Maybe in a different way, but their students are coming in and they're experimenting with these tools. And now you've got a history professor, a political science professor, or a science professor trying to figure out what should I allow, not allow, how is this going to help or hinder my students, both in terms of their ability to do, say, the assignment, but also as we try to develop their cognitive skills.
Well, two ways to slice this, okay? One is, what kind of AI education does the University of Washington or any top university need to provide? And there are three kinds of education. One is education for people, largely computer scientists, who are going to push the field forward, okay? Another is education for people who are going to use artificial intelligence in advanced ways. And we went down the same road 10 and 15 years ago with data science, okay? And the third is preparing every student at the University of Washington to thrive in a world where AI is pervasive and to understand its strengths and its weaknesses.
To be literate.
To be literate, yes. And fluent is perhaps a better word.
Yeah.
And so we have to provide all three types of education. Now, from an instructor's point of view, and this is as true in higher ed as it is in K-12, you have to think about the nature of your interaction with students, your teaching techniques, your evaluation techniques, accounting for the fact that they're going to be using AI. Okay? I think, you're not going to ban it.
Yeah.
Okay?
You're not going to be able to stop it. No.
It's
no
going to be
used.
used. Okay? So, let me just give another example. How do you find out which students in a team project have done the work and which haven't? Well, an easy way to do that is to bring the team in and have a conversation in which you discuss the solution. And some of the people understand the solution in depth, and some of the people are a bit clueless, and you can figure this out. And, so I think you have to think about the nature of assignments, given that you can find, ChatGPT can produce some version of the answer to any question.
So you started out by saying that the computer science field has learned and had to adapt kind of on a dime, or at least much more quickly than other disciplines. So K-12 education is not known for turning on a dime or quick changes, and yet this technology is roaring onto the scene, the same for K-12 as it is for a computer science program. Schools starting up now, students are already using these tools. What are your thoughts and advice about how the K-12 environment should be incorporating, embracing, or trying to hold at bay AI?
So I'm going to say something obvious that skirts the question slightly, okay? If the students are going to be using AI, they need to be informed consumers of AI, right? And that's what's critically important. And I'll give you an analogy in the data science world. Two of my colleagues at the University of Washington have a wonderful textbook and course, the title of which is Calling BS, except they use the full word
Okay.
in the world of big data. Okay, and the idea is to help students become informed and skeptical consumers of quantitative arguments that they are presented with. All right, because you're constantly, presented with assertions
Yep.
that appear to be backed by numbers.
So you want to develop some critical thinking skills.
Exactly, some skepticism about these things. And there are some wonderful examples on there, on the Calling BS website. One is a set of folks who published a paper that built on a 100-year history of trying to identify facial characteristics that are suggestive of criminal intent. Okay, and this goes back more than a century. And so this was a paper full of little diagrams of faces with angles and thetas and epsilons and things like this. And needless to say, what they had done was to use hundreds of thousands, millions of photographs in order to determine, machine learn these characteristics that are indicative.
This is a criminal, this isn't.
Right, okay. Now, where do you get those photographs from? Well, from high school yearbooks and mugshots. Well, it turns out that you're usually pretty happy when you're graduating from high school, and things are not going so well when you're in the cop shop being booked, okay? So what they had really done was to machine learn a smile classifier.
Ah, right. Not a criminality classifier.
Right, okay? So the point is this kind of informed approach to using and living with technology needs to be part of K-12 education.
Interrogate the tool, question the results.
Exactly right. Okay, trust but verify, or
Trust
something
but
like
verify.
that.
Yes, as a reporter, I can appreciate that. So there's a more conservative parent group that just put out a statement this week, or in the last couple of weeks, saying it was a message to the United States DOE, Department of Education, basically saying, don't let AI in the classroom until we understand it better, there's more safeguards, you can protect children from, bad things that might pop up because of it or be created by it. It's just not ready to be in the classroom. What is your view about, again, as it's changing quickly, we don't really know yet how to use it well. Do we want to welcome it into the classroom or
it's
keep it
going
at
to
bay?
be in the classroom. It's going to be a part of kids' lives. We have to figure out how to use it. I think you just have to accept the fact that it is part of daily life. And, I think teachers, we were having a conversation today in the Allen School about this, are understandably skeptical of the latest shiny object, okay? And, there's a long history of, for example, technology being put into schools and not improving learning outcomes. Mm-hmm. And, we're in a state that does not have a very well-supported K-12 system. We don't even have a very well supported pre-K system. Someone in higher education, I will freely admit that the best dollar spent is $1 on pre-K preparation of kids, all right? So I understand that teachers and parents are skeptical, and I think that that skepticism is justified, but AI is going to be with us, it's going to be with the kids, it's going to be in the classrooms, and we have to prepare the students to live in that world.
And just before we go to break here, as you think about the critical thinking skills that are required, maybe in particular for the jobs of the future, because AI may be doing the more rote jobs. One of the great concerns is that AI is going to write my kid's essay, and then he's not actually going to have to think about and understand what that book was about. So how do we avert that crisis of, if I'm not looking at my phone and endlessly doom scrolling, I'm going to be having AI do all my work for me, and I'll never have to learn to think or do anything for myself.
Well, I, as has often been the case in this half hour, I don't have a very good answer, but I think that one needs to think about how to design the educational environment so that students do learn to think and so that they can't exclusively rely on AI.
And maybe to your point, I think I even heard this example somewhere, I read this somewhere, maybe you do let AI write the first draft, but then you have to work from that first draft.
Sure, absolutely.
To sort of rewrite it, improve it, bring your own ideas to bear. I'm still not completely sold on whether we should let AI write the first draft, but it might be the kind of thinking that needs to happen because this is happening. Okay.
Let me say one of the concerns with AI, and it's worth thinking about, is that we humans tend to equate fluency with authoritativeness. Okay, and one of the problems with these new large language models is they are fluent. Okay, now when you ask Dr. Google about your medical condition, Dr. Google gives you 10 different links to 10 different websites which say 7 different things. And you say, geez, I better go see a real doctor. Okay? When you ask Dr. ChatGPT, it gives you what sounds like an authoritative answer. It may be entirely bogus. Right? So it's human nature to think that fluency equals authoritativeness. And that's an important lesson for consumers to learn. That is, that fluency and authoritativeness are not the same thing.
And maybe it's not even trust and then verify, it's don't trust and then verify. Okay, we are going to take a quick break. When we return, we talk with Ed Lazowska about his remarkable nearly 5-decade career in computer science, during which the revolution was digitized, commoditized, and democratized. Back right after this.
There's been losses every year since the early 1920s. The shoreline itself was almost 2 miles further out there. Year after year, more homes would fall in the water. We have nothing to lose.
Welcome back to Inside Olympia. Joining me once again is Ed Lazowska, Chair Emeritus of the Computer Science and Engineering School at the University of Washington. And we are now going to transition to talking about your remarkable career. And in doing so, we want to kind of honor that because you've just retired and it is a remarkable career, but also to help us start to understand this place we call home and the role that computer science, software, and technology generally has played such a big role in the evolution of this region over the last 40 or 50 years. So let's just start there. We hear a lot about the Silicon Valley. We know technology is driving the economy. We see the largest trillion-dollar companies out there, and they're all technology companies. But what do we need to understand about this? You know, we think about the mountains and the sound, and we think about particular companies. But maybe if we live here, what do we not understand or underappreciate about this region from a technology standpoint?
I think it's important to understand the role that the Puget Sound region plays in computing technology and software in particular globally. We are also, by the way, the center of cloud computing, right? Amazon is here, Microsoft is here, a good part of Google's cloud innovation operation is here. Many companies have moved to the region for that reason. When I arrived in Seattle in 1977 to join the University of Washington, Microsoft was 12 people in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Okay, people forget that history. Bill and Paul set out to write an interpreter for the basic language for the MITS Altair microcomputer, a kit microcomputer. And MITS, the company, was located in Albuquerque. So that's where Microsoft was founded. There's that famous photo of 11 of the 12 people. Somebody picked up a coupon for a free photograph, and they all headed off, got their pictures taken. And, you know, we're blessed that Bill and Paul were born and grew up in Seattle, went to Lakeside, hung around the University of Washington, became passionate about computing, and eventually moved back to Seattle with their company. You know, technology in the 70s in Seattle was Boeing making planes and Fluke making voltmeters and Physio-Control making defibrillators. And, you know, other software companies, AttachMate, WRQ, Aldus, are from the early 1980s. So things have just changed amazingly. We have, of course, countless software companies that were born and raised here. I say from Amazon to Zillow with Microsoft in the middle. But there are 150 engineering offices here of companies headquartered elsewhere, led by Google and Meta, each of which has more than 7,000 engineers in Seattle. So this is important in driving the economy and driving our quality of life. And it's not that every aspect of change has been positive, right? But any other city would give their eye tooth to have Seattle's problems instead of the ones that they have. And I think we have to be aware of that.
Some of this is the accident of birth, and that, you know, the fact that Bill Gates and Paul Allen were from here, as you say, they came back as well.
Yep.
How should we, if this is in essence a story in 5 chapters or 5 decades, let's start just in the 1970s, how should we think about, if that's chapter 1, sort of what that decade was about, the ignition source? What was going on in the 70s?
What was going on in the 70s? Well, you know, we were moving from mainframe computers to mini computers to personal computers during that period of time. And, you know, so again, a field of constant innovation in this region. Remember, in addition to inventing software, and it's important, there was no software industry before Microsoft. Bill Gates wrote this famous letter to hobbyists arguing that they should be willing to pay for software instead of stealing it. Okay, I believe that 9 out of 10 of the support requests that Microsoft and Albuquerque received were from people who had copied someone else's version of the basic interpreter as opposed to purchased it.
Couldn't get it to work.
Yeah, and he said, look, you know, if you're not willing to pay for it, what you're going to get is junk, right? So this is an intellectual effort and a physical effort to produce this software, and you got to be willing to pay for it. And that was the genesis of the software industry. But with Aldus, we created desktop publishing. Right? That's just, you know, people take that for granted, but that's from Seattle.
So essentially moving from the printing press to online,
right.
Doing it at your desk.
Aldus PageMaker was really the genesis of serious desktop publishing. It's from Seattle back in the 1980s.
Okay, so the 70s, it leads us into the 80s. What was happening? How would you think about and frame the 80s?
Well, that was really the rise of personal computing and also of, in the academic world, scientific workstations, right? And it was...
And just to be clear, was that because moving away from mainframes, or is that not the... What was before the scientific workstations?
I think it's moving from mainframes and mini computers, which were shared, to personal computing both at the hobbyist end
And at the university researcher end.
That is sort of right micro.
Do you remember getting your first workstation?
That's an interesting question. The first truly personal system I had, let me back up. When I was an undergraduate in the 1960s, we used a building-sized computer, the university mainframe, as a PC between midnight and 8 a.m.
Okay.
All right? So
It sounds a little like Paul Allen.
it was an
and Bill
IBM
Gates.
360 Model 67, but it was used as a PC with a single graphics terminal from midnight to 8 in the morning. Okay, so at some level, I had a PC in the early 1970s, but perhaps the first truly personal machine I had.
Professor Lazowska, here is your university-issued device.
It was probably what's now called a classic Mac, the original Macintosh in 1984.
Okay.
Okay?
So that.
But let me say that
yeah.
we were, at that point in our department, building personal workstations out of processors with bitmap displays. So I remember the Xerox Alto dates from the 1970s, and Xerox brought about network laser printers and things like that. So, we were moving in the direction of single-user scientific workstations at the Boeings of the world and the universities of the world, PCs in the office, and simpler PCs in people's homes.
Okay, what about the 90s? And now it starts to come into a little bit more clear focus for me. I remember getting my first computer.
Yeah, so I think
college.
that, the 90s was really the rise of the internet. The internet dates to the late 1960s, and the number of nodes, if you will, computers on the internet, in fact, like everything in computing, was doubling every year or so, every 18 months, doubling and doubling and doubling, but it was below people's radar screen. And what happened in the early 1990s was the protocols for the World Wide Web were devised by Tim Berners-Lee, and then the Mosaic web browser was produced by Mark Andreessen at the University of Illinois. Okay? And that graphical web browser sort of brought the internet to everybody, although at pitifully low bandwidths, right? We were still connected to the internet typically by modems at maybe 1,200 bits per second, 2,400 bits per second, but nonetheless, it sort of burst on the public consciousness, and everybody was online.
And then the 2000s, and let's bring in sort of what's happening at the school, in the computer science school and the computer science and engineering school, as this technological evolution is happening. But we move into the 2000s. At that point, what's happening technologically, and then what's happening in the
Well, let me
school?
back up a bit. The Allen School, the computer science department at the University of Washington, was founded as the computer science group in 1968.
It was just a group.
It was
Not
a
a
graduate.
department,
It was a
not-
graduate program
graduate
that reported the graduate school. Yeah, there
But
was
not available to undergrads at that
right.
point.
There was an undergrad program, and it became a department of computer science in 1975. So 2 years before I arrived. The good news is that we grew up alongside and in incredibly close relationship with the region's software industry. Okay, and
So this wasn't just academics thinking big thoughts and then graduating students out into the world that didn't have the skill set that the industry needed. There was a close marriage and relationship.
well, the industry was being born, right? And if you scroll back to the 1970s, there was IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Honeywell, a few sort of big computer companies. Okay, but sort of the Microsofts of the world started bursting on the scene in the 1980s, and the scene was Seattle. Right?
And that fueled then the pipeline of people who wanted to get into this field.
That fueled the pipeline of people who wanted to get into the field, but it also, from the beginning, we had a close relationship with those companies and the people who staffed those companies. We were sending graduates to those companies. An interesting aside is that when IBM, you remember, was looking for an operating system for its PC in the early 1980s, there were two operating systems they considered. One was produced by a company called Digital Research in California that was founded by an alum of our department. okay? The one that they actually procured was one that Microsoft purchased from Seattle Computer Products, a little company, and it had been built by Tim Patterson, an alum of our department. So whichever operating system IBM chose for its PC, it was going to be an operating system written by a UW Computer Science alum. It's quite amazing. So we've been in the business working with these companies, producing things of serious value for decades.
So as you think about, as we get, let's go back to the 2000s then, and then we'll move into the 2000s. So what was happening in kind of the 2000 to 2010 realm?
Well, I think, in that range, things just continued moving forward. I think from the public perception point of view, bandwidths kept increasing, okay? From the user point of view, what happened was processors became faster, computers became more capable. What we expected the software to be able to do for us became more ambitious. There was a phrase that people used to sort of a quip referring to Bill Gates and Gordon Moore of Moore's Law. It was what Gordon giveth, Bill taketh away. And this was a facetious comment on the fact that PCs, despite the fact that processor capabilities were doubling every 18 months, didn't seem to be getting any faster. Okay, and the real explanation was that we were asking the computers to do more. We didn't used to have graphical user interfaces. We didn't used to have online spell checkers. Okay, all these sorts of things were ways to use the computing power that we were gifted.
And then that drove, of course, more innovation in computer chips and in computing power.
Sure, it's a sort of virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Now, something we missed in the 1990s was the arrival of Jeff Bezos and Amazon, right? And, Jeff moved out here to start a humble little bookstore. It's worked out pretty well.
I want to, in the 2000s, also know that there was the dot-com crash.
Yep.
And, by the way, you also were named in that decade the inaugural Bill and Melinda Gates chair.
I was.
But was there a moment during that decade in the sort of wake of the crash where people thought, well, maybe this is over? Or did people think it was just a temporary blip?
I don't know what people thought. I knew what I thought, which is that every field has its ups and downs, okay? And computer science has had ups and downs in employment. There was a down in 2000. There was a down in 2008. There's something of a downturn now. We have ups and downs in student demand. And student demand tends to follow perceptions of job availability. And so that too has dipped, but fundamentally it's going up as it goes out to the right, and I think that trend is going to continue.
Bringing us to the sort of modern times here, the 2010s, I know you had a number of additional kind of career accolades at that time. Maybe most importantly, the School of Computer Science and Engineering was elevated to the Allen School. But what sort of, how would you, what's the organizing sort of theme of that decade?
I think our philosophy has always been that we're a unit of the entire university. Okay, computer science doesn't belong to some school or college, the College of Engineering, the College of Arts and Sciences. It has pervasive relationships and pervasive influence throughout the university, and we've always had that view of ourselves and our role. We have collaborations that span the entire campus. It transforms other disciplines and it transforms our discipline, and that has sort of always been our perspective on our role. Now, in the late 1990s, we were desperately short of lab space at a time when the field was becoming more experimental, robotics and things like that. And the community supported us in constructing what became the Paul G. Allen Center for Computer Science and Engineering, our first building that made us competitive. There was not yet a huge increase in student demand at that point, so the goal of the Allen Center was enough lab space that we could be a modern computer science program and do the robotics of the world.
And also expand your capacity.
Well, the capacity actually came later, okay? So that building opened in 2003, okay? And we were producing about 160 degrees per year then, and there was not excessive student demand at the time. But it's important to realize that although the building is named for Paul, It had more than 200 donors, more than 10 of whom were at the $1 million level or greater, okay? So this was a community effort, and the community has always supported us just incredibly. By 15 years later, student demand was exploding, and we opened a second building just now 5 years ago or so, the Bill and Melinda Gates Center for Computer Science and Engineering, which was named for Bill and Melinda by a dozen friends of theirs, plus Microsoft, out of gratitude. And again, a largely privately funded facility that made it possible for us to get to the point where we're now granting 650 bachelor's degrees per year and about 800 degrees in total.
Which I imagine is still not meeting demand.
It is still not meeting demand, but it's important to understand that the software industry, in particular Microsoft and Amazon and the Washington Tech Industry Association, has been instrumental in helping the legislature understand the importance of growing our program. And there is some small bit of self-interest, okay? Amazon and Microsoft hire lots of our students, but our students this past year went to 120 different companies. I think Amazon and Microsoft, Brad Smith is just a god, the president of Microsoft. So much of what he does, so much of the good he does is not his day job, okay? And I think he understands the sort of education that Washington students need to get if they're going to be competitive in the 21st century.
And he's very involved in the public policy landscape in this state,
Absolutely.
as well as
Yes.
helping to run Microsoft.
Yep.
So I do want to ask you then, and part of what's remarkable about this is your career has spanned, your 48-year career has spanned essentially the life of the school. And I want to ask you about the 50th anniversary, the naming, again, going back to the naming
Yep.
of the building. And then I understand that there is you have to tell us about the beam. We have a beam here, but I want to know about the beam in the building. But tell us a little bit about the significance of the 50th anniversary.
Well, on our 50th anniversary, Paul Allen made a gift that made us the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering. And being linked in perpetuity to someone who has changed the world in the way that Paul did is valuable to us in many ways. It's inspirational, it's aspirational, and it's reputational. And again.
And by the way, we should just mention that when he was a student there, he got in some trouble. And
Well,
maybe at that time you would not have guessed that eventually the school would be named for him.
When Paul was up on stage naming the Paul G. Allen School in 2017, that was our 50th anniversary year, he pulled out of the pocket of his suit jacket a letter that one of my faculty colleagues had sent him in 1971 demanding that he turn in his key.
Turn in your key, meaning you no longer have access.
He had been-
You were in that much trouble.
Right. Paul and Bill and their friends, their Lakeside friends, had been using our labs.
As high schoolers.
As high
They
schoolers,
weren't
right.
even college students yet.
And there were a set of transgressions which seemed laughable in retrospect, okay? And in response to these transgressions, my colleague Helmut Goldie demanded that Paul turn in his key. Now, Paul at age 16 had thought to save this letter, and at age 50-something in 2017 had managed to find it and pull it out and read it to the audience at the dedication of the Allen School.
That is so funny.
But
I guess he had the last laugh.
He had the last laugh, and thank goodness he didn't bear a grudge. We told him he was free to use our computers in the future as much as he wanted.
So the beam.
The beam,
Is-
there's a topping out ceremony when
Okay.
you put the final beam on a building.
yes.
And so we did have a topping out ceremony for what became the Gates Center. And the Gateses and many others signed the beam, and then it got hauled into place
Hoisted.
and placed in the building.
Got it.
Yeah,
And I think we have video of this that you're seeing.
Yeah, and
where-
there's,
yes.
this is a standard thing that happens on large construction projects, and it's a wonderful ceremony because it marks the end of the structure and the beginning of the putting up the walls and fitting things out.
I think for people who are not in this field, it's a bit of a mystery. Why would somebody be interested in looking at computer code? Why would somebody want to be a software engineer? What is the appeal? What drew you in? What draws in all of these students to this world for somebody who just feels like it's not for them?
I think there are, let me give you the narrow one and the broad one. The narrow one is all of us like rapid, instant gratification. And when you write a computer program and it runs, there's instant gratification. And it's an intellectual exercise. You're solving a puzzle. Okay, so
But then the puzzle leaps to life and does something for you.
exactly right. Okay, so it's like a crossword, the New York Times crossword, except it leaps to life.
Once you're
just
done, and
as
then
you say.
Okay.
Okay, now the more expansive reason is that computer science gives you the power to change the world. Okay, if you can imagine it, you can build it, and you don't have physical constraints, only intellectual constraints. Okay, so that power to change the world and to honestly make people's lives better, not just different but better, is just an awesome power, and it is inspiring and inspirational, and I can't imagine why you'd choose anything else.
I want to, again, go back to the idea that we're sitting in the seat of state government. You have graciously come down to do this interview here. You talked about the investment that the state legislature has made over the decades or over the years into building capacity in this school of computer science and engineering. As we move into this AI era, what do you think policymakers need to be thinking about?
Well, let me approach that from a couple different directions. Okay, one of the things policymakers need to realize that our kids' future is our region's future, and we need to have an improved education system top to bottom from pre-K through graduate school, right?
The world's getting more complex, not less complex.
And we have an image of ourselves that I think is somewhat better than the reality. Okay, so it's really important to
Maybe
have
we're giving ourselves a little grade inflation there.
Yeah. But it's
Says
important to
the
have
professor.
a realistic view of how we're doing and commit to make things better. Okay? And we could talk about tax policy and things like that, but I think let's not. But I think the education system is number one, and in many ways, the region's tech success has been built by others who moved here. Okay, and our kids need to be the first-tier beneficiaries of the modern innovation economy that we're creating here. We're not creating this for other people's kids. We're creating it for our kids, and we have to make sure that our kids are prepared to take advantage of it and contribute to it.
And I guess it goes back to that notion that we just talked about, where if you can provide a good education, give kids that opportunity, then they can create the next companies, stay here and do this and build the economy for the next generation. But we want it to be that sort of self-fulfilling thing, and it's circular here.
The other thing I would say is that it's important to realize that the tech industry is responsible for a fair amount of the resources that allow us to achieve our dreams as a region. So, I think it's just important to realize that we need to have, I'm a hopeless left-winger, but I think we need to be reasonably pro-business in our cities and in our state, because we have to realize that these tech companies are providing the wealth that allows us to do many things. Now, that's not to say that the tech companies and their employees couldn't do more, but I think we just need to understand the positive role that they play. And again, the fact that any other region in the country would trade their problems for ours in a minute. I often think about people complaining about downtown Seattle and the fact that there's not enough park space and there's too much Amazon and this and that and the other. I, with Lee Hood, worked hard to promote the Seattle Commons vision in the early 1990s. And the deal there was Paul Allen loaned $20 million, as I recall, to the Commons effort so they could start buying up parking lots and one-story warehouses. And the deal was, when the citizens approved the Seattle Commons effort, he would forgive the loan. Okay? And we voted it down, not once, but twice. So indeed, what Paul built there does not quite achieve our vision, but we voted against our vision twice, for God's sake, okay? And what's there is so much better than what was there before.
I have less than 30 seconds, but just a final thought for us, especially as we think about this brave new world.
Well, I think we need to use AI to augment human capabilities, not to replace human capabilities, and that's a challenge for all of us.
Okay. Ed Lazowska, the Bill and Melinda Gates Chair Emeritus in the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. Thanks again for the interview.
Delighted to be here.
Congratulations on a long, illustrious career, and I hope you're enjoying your retirement, which, as I know, is quasi-retirement. You're still teaching. Thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We will see you again next week.